So is my screen visible, sir? So is my screen visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yeah. Okay, sir. So I am Chandrasekhar Joshi. I am associate professor at National Institute of Fashion Technology, Jodhpur, India, and I have co-authored this article with Dr. Tulika Mohanty. So we have done research on GST reforms in the context of urban employment for the Indian apparel industry, and we have specifically taken Delhi NCR region as the cluster. As you must have seen the recent reports that there have been number of clashes, labor clashes in Noida and nearby areas, and one of the major reasons of these clashes is said to be the increasing LPG prices and corresponding demand by the way laborers to increase their salaries to 20,000 rupees. So it is a complete paradox, and it highlights the GST reforms at its core, because at one side the workers, especially the informal workers, are grappling with lower wages, continuously lower wages, owing to the shrinkage margin by the large retailers and apparel buyers across the world, and informalization of the sector. Correspondingly, there has been a increase in the oil prices, and the more structuring of the policy or the government sector has led to more informalization of the labor, and hence reduction of their potential wages. So it is a paradox where the solutions have to be found, and here on this crucial juncture and this gap we present uh, our paper, that the lowest nodes of production, that is small businesses, household businesses, and informal workers of the garment supply chain, are most precarious and perilous because they are most affected when any impact happens. And since GST is a structural reform to make the firms visible, how it has impacted those smaller firms and informal workers is important to highlight. So the issue, as I said, that more than 90% of workers in the broader textile and apparel sector in India are informal workers, and this has been consistent since last 10 years. So there is a question that whether formalization necessarily means that better opportunity for the workers, and does it translate into better livelihoods for the workers ultimately? So my research question addresses that how GST reforms has impacted the wage capitalist structure and ultimately the labor network of garment production in NCR region, specifically the NCR region. Because NCR region is one of the most informal sectors even in India. The methodology which I have done, we have drawn from the secondary sources, reliable secondary data from the all ministries reports, industry databases, survey reports, economic survey reports, and academic journal articles to draw upon, and have used thematic analysis and econometric analysis at the macroeconomic indicators and also at the database for the Delhi NCR cluster specifically, which consists of Noida, Gurgaon, Okhla, and Faridabad to be specific. The more important data sources which have taken are government reports like GST Council, Ministry of Textile Council, Press Information Bureau, Economic Survey of India, and like analytical framework we have used to it is a triangulation framework. Like the first stage we have done a econometric evaluation of different indicators, and then we have tried to triangulate it with the qualitative interpretation through a thematic analysis of pre and post GST data. So GST data industry structure is like this: out of 95 million employment in the textile industry, almost 80 to 85% are unorganized uh, laborers. 80 to 85% production also comes from the unorganized work organization. So you can see that the whole global supply chain is running mostly on the unorganized production network. And this is positively or unfortunately is a strength that India has, or India low cost destinations like India has, and especially Delhi NCR cluster, because it is known for low quantity and high flexibility garment orders. So apparel exports have remained consistent, which is again alarming bell, sounds an alarming bell, since 10 years, because in 2016 also it was almost 16 billion. It has remained with little bit of volatility has remained stagnant. There is multi-layer subcontracting which happens at the NCR Delhi cluster level, where large buyers outsource to exporters, exporters outsource to fabricators, fabricators outsource to contractors, and then contractors ultimately outsold to smaller enterprises and household government units. So there is a lot of middlemen which have been inbuilt in the system, which is a cash-based, low-tax, flexible system, which has been the advantage of Delhi NCR cluster. So we have taken formal and informal sector of the Delhi NCR specifically cluster, which formal is from Noida and Gurgaon, which primarily does exports or gives design services, and production is generally informal, where informal labor has been informally organized as well. So it is not efficiency; it is in fact a advantage for Delhi NCR cluster. So what has GST changed? It has changed the input tax credit chain to for the enterprises. It has made digital compliance mandatory for the enterprises, because otherwise they cannot claim the GST credits. Then interstate tax uniformity has been made easy. Again, it ensures that formalization happens, because otherwise they cannot transport their goods from one state to another state. So this has led to a structural shift between compliant suppliers, but at the same time, those small and micro medium enterprises which cannot bear the cost of compliance, or do not have the resources and know how to become compliant, or else are under the threshold, are marginalized, or they have to exit. So digitized transaction do not necessarily mean the formalization of labor, although it means increased accountability and traceability. Hence, more fear in the for smaller and household enterprises. The consequences are the informal sector has not been eliminated, but it has been rerouted. It has reframed, because ultimately it has to sustain somehow. So GST hasn't formalized the production; it has just formalized the billing layers. So the findings from the data are basically there are three key insights which drew out of the data. One is there are differential consequences for the civil and political society. When we say civil society, it is about, when we talk about systems, we talk about formal structures, we talk about formal and visible labor. And GST has primarily addressed the concerns of civil society. But when we say political society, it also includes the informal labor, which cannot become structural or formal overnight. So it has excluded political society. So you can see that it has for organized sectors, it has resulted in better tax efficiency and supply chain consolidation. Whereas small hiccups are there, like working capital blockage and inverted duty structures, which have fortunately been addressed somehow in GST 2 reforms, which has come in 2015, 2025, and has been implemented. Although the results are yet to emerge. For unorganized sector, however, there is loss of contracts, because no GST registration means no compliance. No compliance means no orders from the compliant buyers. Margin compression, because already the prices are high because of additional GST levy. So the margin has to be passed either to the labor or to the small enterprises. Then partial individualization is the consequence. There has been rising GST registrations since like 7 8 years, but there are no comparable PF ESIC enrollment, nor decrease in informal labors in government industry, which elaborates that although formalization of the organization has increased, formalization of labor has not translated correspondingly. The second finding is organized sector. For the organized sector, gains means with liquidity stress, because of certain hiccups in the GST structure, which partly has been addressed in recent GST 2 reforms. So there has been no significant changes in the employment, and there has been no significant changes in exports. Because one of the reasons has been attributed to working capital stress, according to many reports, including RBI reports, that there is an increasing credit gap, and GST refund delays, which have been doubled from 30 to 60 days from to 60 to 90 days, which has logged in the working capital, and hence the whole inventory operating cycle of the exporters have retrenched, which means although it appears that it is a temporary tax on liquidity, not just on the value. Although for exporters, Yeah.
minute's time. Please wrap it up.
Pardon, sir?
You have a minute's time. If you can
Yeah,
quickly
sure, sure,
wrap it up. Yeah.
sure, sure. The third finding is that unorganized sector means exclusion without transition. Although GST has been, has positive ramifications for medium enterprises and large enterprises, but I unfortunately the informal sector, which is almost 80% of the whole apparel industry, has been left out. There is not much for them. There are twofold, kind of impacts which on informal labor. One, not only they become more informal and more marginalized, and hence their wages are lost because they have to be restructured by the smaller organization to remain. Second, also because state does not have more money now because of GST, hence the money spent on labor welfare has also shrunk. The result that the secondary data sources have shown that, and so it has resulted in dual kind of equilibrium, whereas companies outwardly they are formal and tax compliant to get orders, but internally while in their operations they are informal. So it is hybridization, whereas compliance is affected and informal core is there which remains informal. So conclusions are that industry needs as I said that the core advantage of NCR Delhi cluster and of Indian apparel industry is also fast, flexible production. But GST requires rigid compliance. It is a paradox that how will both go hand in hand. So labor remains informal, labor remains unprotected. So because to gain the advantage of the nodes of production, the whole apparel sector has to reinvent itself. So these are some policy recommendations that probably some labor reforms are required to be done. So one can be the formal forms and informal labor should be accepted by the government, and necessary tweaks should be done in the policies so that the smaller firms are not afraid of, scared of registering or making the informal labor visible. Less rigidity should be there, and shared service center could possibly, uh, you know, reduce the burden, compliance burden, and reduce the cost for smaller firms. So GST could then leverage the win-win situation both for the informal and informal sector. So that's it from my side. Thanks a lot to the organizers, to Shukla Mahanti ma'am, to the chairman of this conference. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so
If you
much,
have any
Dr.
questions, I'm happy to.
Dr. Mahanti, for this brilliant presentation. So you have in your presentation covered how exactly GST has impacted different layers of the society. You looked at different kinds of labor. You also said how exactly it has touched upon the physical society, the political society, and the civil society. And you said that it has completely left the political society. You also said that how it has been able to make the supply chain even robust, and also try to look at how exactly the rural population could be, the interest of population could be protected. Thank you so much. Now we go to the next presenter, Dr. Sophia. Sophia Fatima. Dr. Sophia Fatima, please.
Fatima.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
A very warm and exuberant good afternoon to one and all. Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Sufia Fatima. I'm Dean Faculty of Commerce and Management and Head Department of Commerce at Patna Women's College, Autonomous Patna University. With your permission, Chairperson, I would like to share the presentation. May I?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
A very warm good evening to one and all. I extend my heartiest congratulations and deepest gratitude to Sir R.N. Mahanti, Director, Institute for Education, Saraikela, Convener, Professor Dr. Shukla Mahanti, former Vice Chancellor, Kollam University, Co-Convener, Dr. Sweetie Sinha, Principal, Institute for Education, respected Chairperson, Dr. Devashish Pradhan, all the dignitaries and delegates. I'm really happy to become a part of this conference, and today I'm going to give a very brief overview on goods and services tax and urban employment dynamics and overview. So today we have assembled here to discuss in these panels a journey of transformations, a journey of transitions. So the purpose of this presentation is to give a glance to an overview of GST and GST 2.0 to understand the impact of GST on urban employment and to ascertain few recommendations. So to me today, GST feels like to be a tale of dual impact, where we'll be discussing growth and disruptions both. These are the literature reviews, some of them which I have noted, which is being considered while preparing this presentation, alongside with the GST websites of Government of India, and the data is being availed and retracked from there. So GST has contributed to the formalization, improved tax compliance, and promoting economic efficiency. Its impact on employment, especially in the urban areas, has been complex and uneven. Establishment of relationship between GST and urban employment dynamics is of eminence. Urban employment dynamics, which includes formal and informal sectors, are dominated by the retail, construction, and services. So I'm sure since morning everybody is talking about GST and its fundamentals and the foundation stone. So we all know that before July 1st, 2017, India followed a multiple indirect tax structure, which was split between the center and the state. The taxes levied by the center were the central excise duty, service tax, central sales tax, and many more. And the state taxes were the VAT, octroi, luxury tax, entertainment tax, taxes on betting, lottery, etc. So this was called the cascading tax system or the tax on tax system. It had certain major problems with with this pre-GST system, we encountered a lot of major problems like cascading effect of tax. Taxes were imposed at each stage manufacturing, service, sale. Without comprehensive input tax credits, the taxes paid at the previous stages were added to the cost of goods, resulting in tax being calculated on top of the tax. The next is the complex and non uniform. Each state had different VAT rates, forms, and compliance rules. This made interstate trades really difficult. Due to these fragmented markets, each state was essentially a distinct, isolated market which complicated the supply chains. Tax barriers like that of CST, entry tax, and octroi caused delays at the state borders, increasing the logistics cost and time. Narrow tax space, whereby many sectors like services were under the center, only goods under the states caused disputes on their distinctive classifications. The multiple cess and surcharges added to the burden without credit. Changes after GST implementation. So today's GST, which is being implemented on July 1st, 2017, follows one nation, one tax, and one market. The structure, we are all aware of it. GST Council is a constitutional body responsible for making recommendations to the union and state governments on issues related to GST, and it is the key decision-making authority for GST in India, and we are all aware of that. So these are, we know that GST Council is more popularly known as the Parliament of GST, which is constituted by these 33 members. The concept of GST and formalization involves encouragement to the business registrations, improvement to the tax compliances, and it also adds to the compliance burden. I see GST as a reformative tax architect. India's most significant indirect tax reform since independence, which brought a unified destination based value added tax on the supply of goods and services, has replaced multiple cascading taxes, and its core objectives have been elimination of these cascading taxations, harmonization of tax structures across states, ease of doing business, formalization of the economy, and transparent compliance via digitization. These are the different types of GST in India, we are all aware. So let us go down the memory lane and have a catch on the GST regime before the latest reforms. These were the rates 5% for the essential goods, 12 and 18% for the majority of the goods and services, and 28% for the luxury and the sale goods. GST 2.0, whereby we talk of rate rationalization and the key migrations in it, where many 12% goods are now being converted into a 5% tax. Everyday items have become cheaper, and most 28% tax goods are now coming under the bracket of 18%. Select sin items and luxury items are charged at 40%, and cess part back except for tobacco and pan masala. The latest GST reforms, GST 2, simplification and rationalization, involves the key structural changes of 5% for essential and merit goods, 18% for the general goods and services, and high rate of 40%, as I said, for luxury and symbols. GST and employment. While GST promises to formalize economy, improve compliances, and enhance revenue mobilization, concerns persist regarding impact on informal sector, which employs 425 million workers and contributes to the 50% of the GDP. To protect small businesses, the GST structure exempts firms with an annual turnover under rupees 40 lakhs for goods and rupees 20 lakhs for services. Why is GST needed, or what was the rationale behind it? So we have to understand the tax on tax. For a small example, the soap of rupees 100 is before GST it was of 180, and now when post GST 2.0 we see that soap of rupees 100 is just of rupees 105. So this has definitely attained the caption of one nation, one tax vision. And global angle is definitely 160 and above countries have GST and VAT. India was late, but it learned from them, and we are now competitively having our own GST. So rate rationalizations are presented in this slide. These reforms often referred as the most extensive since GST's introduction, whereby many consumer durables like TVs, air conditioners saw a reduction from 28% to 18%, and autos and two-wheelers saw significant rate cuts from two-wheelers of less than or equivalent to 350 cc moved to 18%. Tractors and agricultural machinery attract 5% GST. The insurance premium relief has been given on the life and health insurance, and they're largely exempt. How GST reforms affect the economy, and that's a question, and there are certain theoretical pathways to the same. And for that, we need to understand the impacts on livelihood and employment. Consumption theory and demand elasticity, like lower GST, will result in lower consumer prices on goods and services. That will lead to increased disposable income, high demand elasticities. On the other hand, the supply side growth effects, the reduced business costs will lead to high production, better competitiveness, greater capacity utilization, expansion in employment in formal and informal sectors. It also includes GST reforms whereby urban economies benefit through consumption growth, production expansion, and formal job creation. This is one picture which I have included whereby we can see that how this cascading effect, that is the tax on tax, where a product is taxed at every stage of the supply chain from manufacturer to retailer to customer. Let's discuss a few relevant data which have been taken from the Government of India website of GST, where I have presented the latest GST collection data for the financial year 2025-26. So these gross GST collection for GST revenue is rupees 20.27 lakh crore, which is up by 8.3%. In February 2026, it's rupees 1.83 lakh crore gross, which is 8.1% higher than the previous month. And the March data, which has been recently released, is rupees 2 lakh crore, which is gross up by 8.8%. That is year on year 10 months high. January 2026, we had rupees 1.93 lakh crore gross, 6.2% annual growth, and these are the numbers as of February 28, 2026. So these data have been taken from the tables which are available on the websites, and this is, I understand that it's not pretty legible, but it's a huge table, so we can refer. I have put that up in my references. So this slide presents the gross and net revenue of February and March 2026, whereby the breakup for the GST collection for the month of February 2026 for gross domestic revenue is rupees 1.36 lakh crore, which is up by 5.3%, and gross import revenue is of rupees 47,837 crore, which is up by 17.2%. The net GST after refunds is rupees 1.61 lakh crore, which is up by 7.9%. And for March breakup, we see the domestic revenues at rupees 1.46 lakh crore and import revenues at 53,861 crore, which is up by 17.8%. These are the trends. Okay,
What is
sir,
it?
I understood. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So these are the top contributors in pre-settlement. Maharashtra had topped with 10,286 crores, followed by Karnataka and Gujarat. The industry-wise effects have been put up in this slide. These are the industry-wise effects, whereby textiles and leather man-made fibers reduced from 18% to 5%. The impact of GST is clearly showing on the domestic consumption. Vehicle sales increased after the GST rate reductions. Services from 12% to 18% rate changes and ITC reversal has been reflected here. This slide presents the SGST and SGST portion of IGST settled to states and union territories in the month of February 2026, and these are the amounts presented in crores.
Now, any particular outcome that you would like to present before us? These are all data. What is the outcome if you just can conclude with that? The final slide.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. I have shown these 8 years of journey of GST at a glance, where we have seen the constitutions of the businesses from various constitutions. This is GST Interactive Technical Assistant Chatbot, GST Health Techs. The impact on urban livelihood is based on the parameters of consumption expansion in cities, formal job growth, enhanced digital trade, and GST's urban relevance on the urban economy. The channel mechanism employment effects are on formalizations, compliance burden, logistics revolutions, and gig platform economy. This slide presents the India-specific urban employment dynamics. So now the big question is how GST, I mean, it's being a tax reform, it touches jobs. So GST is a tax on goods and services. So how does it create or kill jobs in cities? It doesn't hire anyone directly, but it changes how businesses behave and changes who they hire.
Ma'am,
So
I'm
these are the
very
slides
sorry
whereby.
to just have to request you to conclude because there are too many slides and
Okay,
we will
sir.
have
Okay, I will do that. I understand there is a
yeah.
paucity of
Now,
time.
what I'll say is
Yeah.
I'll
Okay,
request
will do.
the audience to bring your paper and get back to you if they have any questions. So we'll conclude here, ma'am. Thank you so much for your contribution. I'll just summarize what
Okay, sir.
actually we
Thank you so
discussed
much.
in
So
this.
I finish. Yeah, that GST is definitely a game changer. And GST is not just a tax reform, it's a business reform, a logistic reform, and India's biggest experiment in cooperative federalism. And these are the references. Thank you so much. Thank you so much and
Thank you
have a
so
great
much
evening ahead, everyone.
for this
Thank you.
very informative presentation. Now we'll move over to the presenters and we'll actually have 6 to 8 minutes time per presenter and we'll rather appreciate if we can stick to 6 minutes time or 7 minutes time because we'll have sufficient time to conclude all the presentations. I would now call upon Dr. Pamela Ghosh Datta on the topic, a study on the impact of GST on gig and platform economy in India. Dr. Pamela Ghosh Datta. Ma'am, please try to take not more than 8 minutes. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Respected Chairperson, Dr. Devashish Pradhan, Professor J.B. Kumaria, Professor Dr. Shukla Mahanti, uh, convener of this conference, co-convener Dr. Switi Sinha, professors, research scholar, and my dear students, a very good afternoon to one and all present here. I feeling privileged and I would like to express my gratitude to Institute for Education for providing me this chance present the paper today. And the topic of my today's presentation is a study on the impact of GST on gig and platform economy in India. Okay, let's start. A new economic transformation has taken place with Indian demographic dividend, giving rise to a new trend called gig and platform economy. Historically, the term gig was used by the musicians to perform to a live performance. The gig and platform economy, a company of a firm hires, where a company or a firm hires a worker temporarily without any full-time or permanent commitment. Okay, sir, thank you. Considering individuals between the age group between 18 and 45 with education ranging from secondary schools to post-graduation, possessing a smart mobile phone and access to a bank account, a new type of professional evolved rapidly after the COVID-19 pandemic. There are independent laborers who prefer to work as freelancer and contract-based jobs without rigid time constraint as per the Niti Aayog report 2022. This study highlights how GST has contributed to formalizing the sector by improving transparency and simplifying the tax structure. It explored the compliances burden and awareness related to issue faced by the gig workers. The objective of this study are to understand the concept of gig and platform economy, to analyze the structure of GST registration on gig workers and platform operators, to assess compliance burden and tax procedure of gig workers and platform operators, to evaluate the positive and negative impact of GST on gig and platform economy. As the time is running short, so I'm just skipping the many slides and on GST and all. I want to share that in India, gig workers and platform operators works in various sectors such as retail, construction, manufacturing, transportation, financial services, and many more sectors. Okay, basically, they are task-based worker, volatile. Their income is volatile, not stable, temporary, project-based work they do, and they are diverse skills spectrum. They have work outside any employment relationship. So there are mainly two types of workers. Type 1 is those who are app-based worker, like in India, transport network companies like ride-hailing companies, apps like Rapido, Meru, Cabs, etc. Food delivery services, those who are Swiggy, Zomato, etc. Home services like Urban Company, Housejoy, Bro for You, Time Saver, etc. And e-commerce platform like Amazon, and also the edutech companies Vedantu and Byju's and all. So if there is also a non-platform based workers. Those are traditional workers doing the casual work. Now I'm directly go on the treatment part of the GST. That we know, according to the section 9.5 of the CGST Act, the tax responsibility has been shifted from individual to the platform operator in certain cases. Section 9 subsection 5 of the CGST Act stated that the platforms such as Ola, Uber, Zomato, Swiggy are directly responsible for paying the GST on certain services. Individual drivers or delivery agents are not expected to register for GST for their platform related earnings. So please share the slide number 8, 9. Okay. So slide number 9, there is a food delivery app. Just I demonstrated one or two app based how GST charge on them. There is a this is a food delivery app where the services receiver customer place the order for food with platform operator, and here platform operator work as an intermediaries, and some of the cases platform operators are directly deal with the gig workers, and they are directly deal with the gig workers actually. In that time there are three parties, and platform operators place the order to the food court, restaurant. Platform operator inform the gig workers to delivery. This is the process. Now who GST, the food court issue the GST bill to the platform operators. Platform operators raises the GST bill to the customer. The platform operators also raise the GST bill for commission to the food court, and platform operators pays the commission to the gig workers for their service to the customer. Now the next slide please. There is a GST treatment. There is generally 4 types of treatment in this business. First one, registered dealer to unregistered dealer, where GST invoice, tax invoice will be generated by the first registered dealers, means B2B. Registered, second case is registered dealer to unregistered dealer. GST invoice, tax invoice will be generated by the registered dealer, B2C. And third case, registered dealer to the registered dealers, there is no GST. No GST invoice need to be generated as unregistered dealer has no GST number, because the threshold limit, they are not overcome the threshold limit, that is in service sector, the service case, that is 20 lakhs per 20 lakhs, and on the northeast states, that is 10 lakhs. So generally they do not cross the threshold limit. So no GST invoice need to be raised. Here the registered dealer
Dr.
has.
Ghosh, please conclude.
Okay.
Just a minute.
Okay. So there is a actually there is a I want to share that there is a, just in 2 minutes, the input tax credit on the RCM tax invoice may or may not be claimed based on the provision of the block credit by the registered dealer who has generated the RCM as invoice and paid to the GST. There are two type of treatment basically depend on the service structure. Now I'm just keeping the positive and negative and all impact and the suggestion. Just I want to share at last that the Indian economic in the Indian economic landscape, gig and platform services created new pathways for employment, and Niti Aayog is expecting around 2.35 crores gig workers by 2030. The GST regime brought both opportunities and challenges in the field: greater transparency, a simple tax structure allowing input tax credit in some cases, and reducing overall tax burden promote the efficiency of platform workers. Although there are some challenges related to TCS reduction, classification of services, ambiguity in tax filing, comprehending the tax system, because intrinsic tax system, many of them doesn't understand, and limited ITC access, enhanced financial strain. GST 2.0 act as a catalyst for the making the tax process fairer, simpler, and transparent. Effective implementation of GST empowers the gig and platform economy by making it sustainable. And just I want to share a thought that if the government may encourage this employment more, some training and the other facilities like GST for the vehicle or gig workers, road tax or toll-free system, or they can as per the social security aspect, they promote any provident fund or SI. This is very contradictory, but any constitutional provision can made, and so we can find many more gig workers and platform operators, and it is really support the vision of Viksit Bharat 2047. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pamela Kosadak, for clearly showing how GST actually has influenced the gig and platform economy, and to some extent has made this process much easier and also more efficient. Thank you so much. So we'll now go over to the next speaker of this afternoon, this particular session, Dr. Rana Surya Mukherjee. Mr. Rana Surya Mukherjee, on the topic GST reforms and its impact on MSMEs and labor formalization. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to everyone. My name is Rana Surya Mukherjee, and I am a GT economics teacher. I teach at 11 and 12 at Baldwin Farm Area High School. And my main purpose here is to, reach out to the resource persons and from here I could take out something, share with my students. But there is my humble finding on GST reforms and its impact on MSMEs and labor formalization. So you can see that there are two main topics. First one is the MSMEs and second one is the labor formalization. I would like to draw your attention that MSMEs are very important. As you know that any economy is divided into three parts: primary, secondary and tertiary sector. And the MSMEs are known as the backbone of our Indian economy. So we will analyze that how GST has impact MSMEs. And the second part is uh, Indian economy is facing a major problem of informalization of labors. So we will check out in this presentation, this research paper, that how GST has impacted it. So as you know, how GST came, how GST, hello, how GST came into existence from 2000, and the struggle was going on, and finally it was implemented on 1st July 2017, and still evolution is going on. So these are objectives. These are and talking about the 2025 next gen reforms. Earlier the tax slabs were different, and now government is focusing basically on the 15% and the 18% tax slabs. So the goal is clear: to clear the confusion, reduce the cascading effects, reducing the financial pressure, and promote economic inclusion. So the that we will be talking about, of course, the craft items and the artisans will be in a better side: cloth makers, shoe makers, stone cutters, and so on. And ultimately, in this paper we will see that how GST has impacted the MSMEs and the job creation in the formal labors. So talking about the classification of MSMEs, as you know, the investment in plant and machinery and the annual turnover, like how much total sales they are doing in the financial year. After that, talking about the sectoral impact, first it is the automobiles and transport. So the two-wheelers, small cars and buses, GST has been reduced from 28% to 18%. Auto component is reduced to 18%. Tractors more than 1800 cc, it is reduced to 12% to 5%. And as in the previous session, sir said that those who can afford, large cars and they can spend well, they can, there it is, means GST is charged at 40%. So ultimately what will happen? Lower production expenses reduce the vehicle prices, the demand will climb up, enabling the MSMEs to expand the operations and hire new staff. Okay, talking about the health and nutrition, as sir already told that paneer and the UTH milk, now GST has been reduced to 0%, which means that they are exempted. Milk beverages, dry fruits, diabetic foods, again 5%. Prepared and preserved fish, fruit juices, it has down to 5%. Tobacco products, as our finance minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, clearly says that tobacco products and these kinds of products should not be within the reach of the common people. So as you can see, the GST has been levied to 40%. So the reduced consumer prices drive higher purchase frequency. For micro and dairy operations, zero rated supplies translate directly into faster payment and improve the working capital. So ultimately what is there, if the prices will be reduced, then for the MSMEs also the capital formation will be there if they have money in their hand. And if we talk about the consumers purchasing power will increase, ultimately the consumption will increase, and this will again boost the Indian economy. Now talking about the textiles, you can see the rates are there. I would not take much time. And then talking about the infrastructural development, housing and construction, cement, marble and granite again to 18%, brick 5%, cement bonded and jute particle boards, it is again reduced to 5%, agro based wood articles again reduced to 5%. As macro housing and road development becomes more affordable, rising tenders drive consistent work and demand for local material providers and micro contractors, so they will flourish in each and every state. Okay, after that, talking about the handicraft, logistics and sustainability. As you know that handicraft industries are the most prominent industries in India. So talking about, during the time of independence also, after independence also until now.
Wrap it up actually. Just a minute's time.
Okay.
Minute's time, wrap it up, please.
Okay, so this is about the QRMP scheme that we have already talked about. So talking about the conclusion, okay, so the policy-based GST 2.0 reforms plus implementing the labor codes, ultimately we are going to see an economic shift in which lower taxes on essentials can reduce inflation to 0.35%, raising the purchasing power. In response, increased consumer demands will help MSMEs to grow and formal hiring would take place, and these are some numbers, like we have Employees Provident Fund Organization who manages all these things, and you can see that 6.2 crore newly individuals are enrolled in EPFO. And lastly, the concluding slide will be, of course, GST reforms are definitely have set new achievements like standardization of informal sectors, more consistent compliance processes, broader inclusion in formal economy, but there are gaps like digital gaps are there. And at last, I would only like to say that as a teacher, I would recommend the GST Council that they should collaborate with NCRT, CBSE, and in class 11 and class 12, most probably in the commerce syllabus, they should include the GST as a section of study.
We understand and note your point. Thank you so much. We have to stop here because we have no more time.
Okay,
Thank you for bringing these aspects of labor participation and how exactly you can increase the consumption and which will spiral the economy back. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
We now invite the final speaker of this particular session, Ms. Anjali Kiskota, to present on the topic understanding the impact of GST in urban business practices through the novel pathway of cultural dimensions. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. A very good afternoon to Dr. Shukla Mahanti, Dr. Devashish Pradhan, Dr. Kumaria, Dr. Sweeti Sinha, and the distinguished faculty present here, esteemed guests, my fellow presenters, and students. The topic of my presentation today is understanding the impact of GST on urban business practices through the novel pathway of cultural dimensions. GST is not just a tax reform, it's a cultural transformation where it changes the way people perceive the state, it redefines legitimacy as it is understood by businesses, and reorganizes business transactions. It is a drive towards formalization, as ILO in its International Conference 2015 urged its member countries to enable a smooth transition from informal to formal economy. In India's formalization drive, the policies that were included for this were demonetization 2016, EPFO enrollment, and goods and services tax that was established in, brought in 2017. Before I discuss the cultural changes of doing business that was brought in by GST, I would like to throw data on the informal sector of India. 86 to 90% of India's workforce is part of the informal sector. Agriculture predominantly being the largest employer of informal workers, and informal work, however, is also widespread in sectors like manufacturing, trade, services, and construction. So informal economy accounts for a major share of employment in India. So how GST transforms the cultural practices of doing business. I'll be discussing this through the different regulations imposed by GST. First, um, excuse me, Aman. Sorry. Okay, it's here. Yeah. First, reverse charge mechanism. So what is RCM? It's a provision under the GST where the liability to pay tax shifts from the supplier to the buyer. What it changes? It brings unregistered enterprises into the tax net indirectly. RCM therefore leads to forced formalization of informal enterprises, as large firms would now prefer not to deal with unregistered suppliers to avoid extra compliance burden. Therefore, small firms are now forced to feel the pressure of registering under GST even when they do not fall even when they fall below the threshold level. On this, on this, I would like to draw on the theories of DiMaggio and Powell's concept of coercive isomorphism, where firms adopt similar structures of doing business, not voluntary, but due to regulatory, legal, or dependency-based pressures. So this changes the structure or behavior of doing business. Another regulatory mechanism used by GST is input tax credit. What is input tax credit? It's a credit mechanism where registered businesses are able to offset the tax that they have paid on the purchase of inputs and capital goods against its output tax liability. So this is possible only if the supplier is also GST registered. Because of this, this transforms the business relationship. How? I would like to draw on Mark Garnowitz's concept of embeddedness, where basic economic activities like buying, selling, hiring are not purely based on price or efficiency. They are shaped by social relationships and network. So what GST does here is that it restructures the economic network by replacing trust-based informal relationships with compliance-driven formal linkages, thereby altering the social foundation of market exchange. Next we have digital compliance, which includes mandatory online registration, filing of returns, generating e-invoicing and e-way bills, basically increasing the dependence on digital tools and intermediaries. So this makes tax compliance not just financial, but also technological. But in a country where access to digital devices and digital skills is unequally distributed, digital compliance may prove to be a burden. On this, I would like to draw on the digital divide theory of Dijik and Cassels, and I would argue that presumptions of universal digital access and digital skills and capabilities, homogeneous uniformity of digital skills and capabilities is a misplaced assumption. Disparities in access, skills, and usage disproportionately affect small and informal enterprises, making GST compliance a burden that amplifies the pre-existing digital divide for the disadvantaged groups. With this, so I would like to conclude by stating that informal economies are not an aberration but a constitutive component of the larger economy. And the persistence of informal practices alongside formal regulatory frameworks such as GST reflect a condition of structured coexistence rather than a linear transition towards formalization, which may not be entirely achievable as many registered companies rely heavily on unregistered suppliers. Workers are fluidic, moving from formal jobs to informal work for want of more, possibly for want of more flexibility. So here, drawing from Hart's conceptualization of informal economy, The reforms and restructuring of economy should focus on coexistence and hybridity rather than choosing to eliminate or obliterate a certain segment of the economy in the drive towards formalization. Thank you. I would like to thank the Institute for Education to allowing me to present my paper at the Institute. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Anjali, for this very refreshingly insightful presentation, which really brought to focus the importance of informal economy. So we should be really considering informal economy as just informal, but actually it's a very important integral component of the overall economy. Thank you so much.
We would like to say thanks to Dr. Devashish Pradhan for chairing the session successfully. Now, I request Professor Dr. Shukla Manti Ma'am, former Vice Chancellor of Kulhan University, an inspiring leader in higher education who has been contributed immensely to the growth of the university and to the cause of quality education in our region, to please conduct the third session of the national conference. Please, ma'am.
Thank you. I welcome Dr. Devashish Pradhan, Dr. Ranu Verma, and Dr. Deepa Sharan as a resource person of this third session, technical session of this conference. Thank you very much, sir. Because it is too late for the third session, I am obliged from this Institute for Education, and many presenters are also there. Three presenters are there. I most welcome Dr. Devashish Pradhan. I am also very eagerly waiting for your speech, sir. Thank you, sir. Welcome.
Again, esteemed Dr. Shukla Mahanti, again, Dr. Kumra from BHU, Dr. Deepasan, distinguished guests, all the presenters, the audience, media, ladies and gentlemen. So it's both a privilege and a proud moment for me to present before you a topic which is very close to my heart. And when Dr. Mahanti invited me to make the presentation, I was very, very scared because GST is not something that I really specialize in. So we had a long discussion what exactly I can talk on. I said that, okay, you have so many speakers on GST. So can I really speak on something which will be bridging this gap between GST and what is happening around the world? And she kindly agreed, and that's why I'm presenting this topic, which is a slight departure, a major departure from what others are presented. So this is about innovation-driven business in a complex and turbulent world, implications for rural and urban livelihood. And somebody who has spent almost the first 20 years of his life in the tribal and rural hinterlands of Odisha, I think is not something very new when it comes to the livelihood options and the way it could be generated. But it's definitely new when you actually bring in the aspects of GST. And you also, when you look at how exactly the macroeconomic indicators and the forces, the societal forces are really shaping it up. So why exactly this topic? Now, let me just try to put it in context. If you look at GST, we are assuming that everything is in our control. Like we are able to decide the GST rates, which are three-tiered, which is actually taking care of the cascading effect, which is also trying to take care of the sort of feared tax on tax aspect, is trying to make it simpler. That's all fine. But what do you really do about all those things which are happening around us, the wars that are going on, the way the economies are really doing badly, and the way you actually see the headwinds all around the world economies. Therefore, we actually need to really see how exactly these forces which are going to shape our economy and how GST can actually work as a buffer, right? And really create those opportunities. So, friends, I think this particular small message by Socrates is saying that the secret of change is to focus not on fighting the old, but on building the new. It basically says that just don't dwell on something which has happened in the past, and just don't try to flog the dead horse. Try to bring something new. Try to bring a new solution to the problem that you already have. And what you're really living now and seeing now is not just a set of crises, not one crisis, but it's a set of polycrises. Polycrisis is more like a non-ergodic changes, which like one crisis is compounded by another crisis, and one problem is getting more complicated by another problem. So if this is the case, how exactly you can resolve this? Now, this is definitely a problem wherein you see that one particular geopolitical tension is also being compounded by climate risk, is being compounded by other structural changes, is being compounded by economic instability in some part of the world. So how exactly you address this? So one thing to really take note of here is no more something which is temporary or episodic. It is more structural, which is something, there is a permanence to that. It's not fleeting. It's something that we live with. And therefore, we need firms, we need economies which are more resilient. We need forces which could actually address these changes as something which will be an integral part of their overall strategy, or something which will be very central to their overall strategy. Now, if you look at this quickly, now we saw for a while the Syrian crisis, the Syrian civil war in parts of the Middle East, where both US and Russia were involved. And how is it really impacting this GST debate? Let me bring that to focus, to your attention. Now, we've been seeing in the last 1 month that there is a serious shortage of, let's say, cylinders, right? The gas connection is getting affected. Many of the small businesses in the rural areas are getting affected. They've been closed down, and we also see that there have been many such opportunities which were almost on the cusp of being explored, being successful. They're being defeated. We are not seeing the opportunities being explored completely. It is because of the crisis in the Gulf area. I think you understand that. So therefore, it's not something which is isolated, it's not something which is insulated, and therefore we need to really look at them in a kind of integrated manner. And that is why this particular aspect of the war in Afghanistan, the civil war in Syria, and then we saw the dreaded COVID-19 pandemic, which was perhaps the most cataclysmic event in the memory of current human history. I think we know what happened during that time. A lot of things really changed drastically, and which are not really going to go back to its original place, and it's not something which can be restored easily. And then we saw the Russia-Ukraine war still going on, but it's being slightly downplayed because of other events that are going on in different parts of the world. But they are also impacting us because the supply chain is getting affected. A lot of raw material which was coming to India uninterrupted, unhindered, is now getting influenced by that. is really choked, right? And then you saw the Israel-Gaza conflict. And this is something that we call as a Gaza movement, because there are a lot of things which happened during that time which led to the current war between USA, Israel, and Iran. And what is happening is the whole Hormuz Strait is being completely choked, and we are not getting the real supply of the raw materials, including the petrochemicals, including the commodities that we're using on a regular basis. And then we have the other one which I just missed out is also the aspect of the USS claim on Greenland. It is also important. Why I'm telling you is the USS claim on Greenland was not just a claim. It was a claim because of a very profound reason. It was a claim because they wanted to really have ownership of the rare earth magnets and many of the rare minerals. Now, if this really happens, India's position could be really endangered, and which is already endangered in some aspects. And we have seen that in many areas that we are just lagging behind because of the missing element of rare earth minerals. Okay? And then we saw the claim of US on Venezuela, which again has an impact on GST and the overall economy that we're going to talk about. Because the aspect of US claim and almost takeover of Venezuela was because of the oil reservoir they had, right? And because of this particular kind of claim and sort of unilateral takeover of Venezuelan government, India's operations, India's dependence on some aspects of raw materials were severely affected, right? And we know now that because of the closure of Hormuz Strait and the Russia-Ukraine war, I think we have to now fall back on USA for this oil component, which is a very important component. One is that we don't have the rare earth magnets, and we also don't have sufficient amount of oil to really run our country, right? So once we really stabilize that, or we have a mechanism to stabilize that, then perhaps we can think of something wherein we can really do to create more job opportunities in rural and urban areas. So it's not something which is really isolated. They're all connected, and GST, in my argument, in my central thesis, is more about a shock absorber. It's like a buffer, which is trying to create that sort of passage, that living space for India. Now, we've seen how exactly Russia and China have expanded their presence all over the world. It's not just limited to the Gulf region, it's also in Africa, it's also in part of Asia, and therefore, we just need to see how exactly we can create our own space in this crowded world, and where each of these powers is trying to ensure and sort of maintain the supremacy. In spite of all of this, the global trade has really swelled to cross 35 trillion in 2025, and that's something which is a good news. But one bad news is that it's not really happening at a great pace, and we see, going by the IMF a recent declaration, that we are perhaps going to go down by 2.5% or 3%, which is not the rate at which we are growing. So that way, we can see that it's something that we really need to see how we can bring in that aspect of resilience into our practices, not just business practices, but the way we run our government, but the way we run our machinery, how to be more resilient. And it has to be something that has to be more organic and not really just like a knee-jerk reaction. If we look at this, how exactly it has disrupted the geopolitical situation and how exactly it has really impacted the global supply chain, and which naturally has impacted all of us in our everyday life, is that the shipping cost has gone up by 25%. And it is going to increase by another 5% in the days to come. And the lead time has increased by 18 days, which is again going to increase by 6 more days. And the companies are diversifying, which has also increased by 40%. That means they're not just depending on one source for their raw materials and procurement, but they are looking at different sources, rather putting their eggs in different baskets. And in result, what has happened is the output has gone down to 15%. And this is going to be worse in the days to come, because we really see that the war is not going to end, and there are more fronts that are opening up in the areas where we see the war happening, both on the Russia-Ukraine front, the Gaza-Israel, the Lebanon-Israel, and the Israel-Iran war front. Now, what has really happened and how exactly you can see and ensure that the supply chain and operations could be more resilient and more efficient, and which could really be more nimble to take the shock, absorb the shock. One is that you have to really enhance the regionalization, right? You can't really depend on the globalization approach, because that is where the debate of the business strategy advanced by people like C.K. Prahlad, who talked about globalization first, then they talk about localization, but I think this is the era of localization, right? I think we have to really look at options wherein we can source these raw materials in the local area and the places which are nearest to our place. Diversified supply networks, this is something I just talked about. The strategy, leveraging increased inventory buffers, not really depending on this just-in-time concept, but also about having a buffer, because the concept of just-in-time is also being questioned. And the technology adoption for transparency. And all of this could actually, in turn, make this strategic, the supply chain more resilient. Now, what exactly an inclusive global future looks like and how exactly you can do this is by lifting the communities, right? The communities that we are a part of, the communities we belong to, and the communities we are here to serve. And this needs a kind of leadership government, the Indian government, which can actually bring all the powers from the global south to make it a formidable force which can take on the other forces like NATO and maybe the other North, which are more powerful, and they have been influencing exerting the power to exploit other nations. And also the aspect of sustainable innovation. So one is that, because there's not much time, I'm just trying to quickly wrap up and trying to come to the conclusion of my speech, that India always have been a manufacturing powerhouse, right? And in China, when it's struggling to really gain its foothold, and China, when it's trying to really reduce the ratio between the liability and the kind of equity, which is 250:1 right now, India actually has a brilliant opportunity to go and create itself and establish itself as the factory of the world. Now, there are many different views on this. Some people are saying that it's not possible. However, there is a strong argument in favor of this that can really create that. And I think in my argument, which I hope I could make, is that India should really cash in on this opportunity with the advantages that is granted by GST and its council to really create an environment where you can, in fact, create an ecosystem where the productivity could be enhanced. It could be done in a very economical manner, because this whole debate that we had this morning is about three things. One is economy, economics, and how exactly you can make the things economically, right? Because resources you have, resources Pakistan also has, resources China also has, but how exactly you are employing these resources, using these resources to create a competitive landscape, to create a position which is indomitable, a position which is formidable. That's the key. And India, I think, is at the crossroads where it has the opportunity to do that. And India being a member of BRICS, where we actually are talking about de-dollarization now, I think this is an opportunity where India could actually advance this particular aspect to really see that how this particular debate can gain momentum. India is also part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, headed by China. India is also part of Quad. India is also part of RIC. So being part of so many global bodies where we can actually challenge the hegemony of, let's say, the bigger global powers, I think India can really do a lot. And GST has a huge role to play here. So it's all about the efficiency to resilience to innovation, because over the last 5-6 decades, I think when we used to talk about Krishnan and C.K. Prahlad, it was all about efficiency. Peter Drucker also talked about efficiency, that how to really produce your goods most efficiently. And I think in the perhaps achieving operational excellence, that was the debate. And that is how we could see Model T coming into the market, which was basically to create something for the consumers at the lowest possible cost. But that's not all, because we have come to a stage where we have to look at resilience, because we have enough of efficiency, and that is being questioned now. Because efficiency is fine, because you are actually talking about creating something very efficiently, but you must also be resilient, because without being resilient, I think you can't really absorb the shock which we are receiving from the global environment, right? And now the time is to go to innovation, right? And the buzzword is that how exactly you can make innovation one of your DNAs, one of a regular practice. And this is something that I would definitely look at, because GST is definitely in the background, and that is how I'm actually advancing the speech. One is that employment generation, as I said, creating new categories of work and different kinds of work. I think there was a presentation by one of my co-presenters on the gig economy, platform economy, who actually talked about how exactly this is going to make an impact on the gig economy and the workers who are actually living at a precarity, who have been pushed to the brink of vulnerability. So how can we bring them back to the mainstream? And how can you really enhance the productivity? That's something that I overall talked about so far. That how can you improve the output and the quality both, because the output is also going down. As I showed you in one of my slides, that is going down drastically, which is not a great sign for us. And inclusive participation of people. This is not about just you and I were sitting here, we're all privileged people with the top 5% of Indian consumers, Indian citizens, but you also have to look at people who are the gig workers, people who are living at the brink of vulnerability, who have been pushed to the extent of disaster, who have been actually marginalized section. How exactly you can bring them back to the mainstream? Now, this is something I have actually had a lived experience. I was sharing this with one of my close friends this morning. That when you have the lived experience of living in an area which has been a tribal area almost for 20 years, you actually see what are the difficulties they face and why they have not been able to do what you think they should be able to do. Because there is a huge gap in what you think they can do and what they really have. Because they're actually have-nots, right? So how can we really create an inclusive participation? So you can see that GST, if you look at all of this, it actually has unified the market, right? It has tried to increase efficiency, because it is something that you must have. It's not something sufficient, but definitely necessary condition. And it also has made the small scale industries more integrated, and they have been more competitive also. And coupled with that, the power of AI, which is about the predictive supply chain and also the reskilling it has really brought to different kinds of people for creating more opportunity for them. I'm not really expanding more on GST because many of my co-panelists have spoken a lot about it, and I just don't want to repeat them, and therefore this. So more about this, if you look at the sectors in which the rural people are involved, and you can see that they're mostly in agriculture and construction workers, and which is not a great sign, right? Because that's where they perhaps put the hard work, the labor. But then you also look at the manufacturing sector, the services sector. And these are the two sectors where I think there is more opportunity, because we must look at the bigger opportunity here, the services sector, which can really bring these people to the kind of back channels and the centers where they can contribute as software professionals. They can do coding. They can actually be the ones who can create more content, right? They can be the internet service providers. So they can do a lot. So why not really think about that, and why to really remain satisfied with just two sectors? And this is where I think we look at the percentage of participation of urban and rural people, and the service and the manufacturing sector are the two sectors I would argue that we should try to have more rural population, create more opportunities for them. I think this is where I think the lack, the urban economies always have the advantage of thriving on digitization, global market integration. However, the rural economies and the people who are living there perhaps didn't have that opportunity. They didn't have the good luck of using all the resources, and they always were separated from this best of the things that the urban counterparts were enjoying all this while. Now, India is changing in a big way, and there was a time when one of the former prime minister, said that it's fine if 10% of my total allocation budget reaches the final consumer or the final person. But this is no more the case, because we actually have direct benefit, direct transfer of cash benefit to the farmers. So there is a sea change in the way the landscape that we have seen here. And therefore, GST in a way has really brought in those major changes. And you can see that GST has a need. I think this is also a forum where I can really appeal to the GST Council to look at the GST taxation policy right now, because we are no more that competitive that we used to be. India was the fifth largest economy, and the fastest growing large economy right now is at the bright spot when all the economies are really going down. It's growing at the rate of 7%, and IMF this week says that we are growing and going to grow at 6.5%, which is really a great sign. China, which is growing at 7%, is now growing at 3.5% and really down with so much of indebtedness, and they are really finding it out. So Xi Jinping is trying to figure out what to do, and that is the opportunity the GST Council can give us by revisiting the taxation policy and giving an opportunity where we can actually make our enterprises more competitive, we can make our enterprises more successful, and that is where I need to really make this statement even stronger. And along with that, I'll close this thing, my speech with this. The, the leap that India had and the kind of major movement that India had with GST reforms is also being strengthened, it's being accentuated by the kind of digital leap India had in the recent past. It was a time when Indian consumers, Indian people didn't have access to internet. Now there was a time when Reliance offered them free data, right? And that was a kind of turning point, and the rest is history. You can see what India has been doing now with Aadhaar. I think after the introduction of demonetization and GST, we could see what UPI and Aadhaar could do. Now India is a country which has got the largest number of consumers who make transactions on UPI. And the way they have tried to connect most of the gram panchayats and the villages and the office bearers of the rural areas through BharatNet is huge. It's humongous because it's in one of the largest connectivity projects in the world now. And also the way the digital tools have given this new helping hand, a new opportunity to really link the farmers with the real-time market information, and they have been connected with the mainstream now. They can see what is the price in a mandi, whether they want to buy their product or not, whether they actually have to wait for the next opportunity. They can also see when to bid for that particular product, right? And also, this is a huge opportunity for India with GST reforms, where we can see that it can reduce some of the dependence on the other powers and the other macroeconomic forces, which were really trying to create something which was very uncomfortable for us. And that is where GST is more like a buffer, I again argue, but there's a need to make it even stronger and more palatable and sort of more efficient for the Indian rural employment generation schemes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Pradhan, Professor Pradhan has actually he has deliberated everything about the GST in rural and urban both. Thank you very much, sir. Your presentation is excellent. Thank you very much. And next is Dr. Ranu Verma says from NML, and they will say something about GST in rural and actually in urban area.
यहाँ उपस्थित सभी लोगों को मेरा सादर नमस्कार। मैं डॉक्टर रानू वर्मा हूँ। मैं नेशनल मेटालर्जिकल लेबोरेटरी में सेक्शन ऑफिसर हूँ, साथ में DDOP हूँ, दवाई ऑफिसर। मेरा टॉपिक है GST reform and its impact on rural and urban livelihood in East Singhbhum। समय कम है, ये पता है, इसलिए बहुत ज़्यादा समय ना लेकर शॉर्ट में ही मैं प्रेजेंट करूँगी। टैक्स के बारे में कहा गया है कौटिल्य के द्वारा, द स्टेट शुड कलेक्ट टैक्सेज like a bee collects honey from flowers, gently, without harming the flower. It is a challenge for every government to decide the exact rate of taxation. On the one hand, tax provides revenue to government, But on the other, it is always painful for taxpayer. There is always a need for efficient tax system which provide maximum revenue to government so that government can spend sufficient amount of fund on infrastructure, education, skill training, medical facility, etc. And it should impose minimum pain to consumer and producer, minimum changes in disposable income of consumer and producer so that in short run, saving and investment increase and it lead to increase in spending on food, education, health, which will provide a skilled, trained, efficient workforce to industries and ultimately lead to growth and development of economy. The ultimate goal of human being is peace and happiness. Peace and happiness can be achieved only when he has right livelihood. And right livelihood depend on income and employment, whether self-employment or wage employment. And there is very close connection between taxation, खासकर indirect taxation and livelihood and employment generation. In simplest term, indirect tax increase is lead to cost of production increase, price increase, and which lead to decrease in consumer demand, job growth, and especially in retail and manufacturing. And then workers move toward informal job to avoid compliance burden. और जीएसटी जैसे कि हम सभी जानते हैं कि बहुत जीएसटी के पहले बहुत सारे टैक्सेस थे और उन टैक्सेस को मिलाकर क्योंकि उसमें बहुत सारी प्रॉब्लम्स आ रहे थे जीएसटी इंट्रोड्यूस्ड हुआ 1 जुलाई 2017 को ये जो है इंडिया मोस्ट सिग्निफिकेंट इनडायरेक्ट टैक्स रिफॉर्म था सिंस इंडिपेंडेंस जिसमें सभी टैक्सेस को कंबाइन किया गया वन नेशन वन टैक्स के फॉर्मूला पर वो आधारित था और in spite of very good framework and huge tax collection there were some problems which arises continuously such as confusion related to tax slab compliance requirement, inverted duty, etc. etc. इसलिए 56 जीएसटी काउंसिल मीटिंग में कंप्रिहेंसिव रिफॉर्म इंट्रोड्यूस हुआ ताकि जो भी पुराने प्रॉब्लम्स थे वो दूर किए जाएं और मेन पॉइंट्स ऑफ रिफॉर्म जो है उससे ज़्यादा पढ़ने का वक्त तो नहीं है लेकिन इन शॉर्ट में हम कह सकते हैं कि अधिकांश चीज़ें जो कि इम्पोर्टेंट रही हैं उस पर टैक्स रेट कम हुआ है 18% और 12% से 5% पे कम हुआ है और ईस्ट सिंहभूम डिस्ट्रिक्ट ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट डिस्ट्रिक्ट है क्योंकि ऑन द वन हैंड इट हैज ह्यूज डिपॉजिट ऑफ मिनरल्स while on the other it has rich forest vegetation. Nearly 80% areas are covered with huge forest. Agriculture, mining, manufacturing and forest are the backbone of the economy. और एग्रीकल्चर जो है जीएसटी एग्रीकल्चर एंड रूरल लाइवलीहुड का बहुत ही क्लोज कनेक्शन है एग्रीकल्चर खासकर इस सिंहभूम में agricultural activities is not just a livelihood opportunity for villagers of India, but it is a way of life for them. This is a main occupation in East Singhbum district. This district is gifted with paddy producing belt in Behra, Gora, Chakulia. और यहाँ पे मेजर क्रॉप्स भी हैं पल्सेज अरहर वीट मेज एट्सेट्रा तो लेकिन बहुत ज़्यादा प्रोडक्टिविटी नहीं है यहाँ और उसका मेन रीजन है मेन बॉटलनेक्स फॉर एग्रीकल्चर डेवलपमेंट आर monocropping pattern of agriculture, lack of farm mechanization, lack of irrigation facilities, lack of storage facility, etc. Or there is very close relation between taxation and rural development. Taxation affects each and every economic behavior of people. It is through taxation, government provides infrastructure facility, irrigation facility, marketing facility, etc. And farmer also need cheap and best seed, machinery and many other items for farming and personal use. Therefore, tax matters always. And on many items such as tractors, tractor component, sprinkler, drip irrigation, diesel engines, fertilizer input, and fertilizer, pesticide, everything. ये tax rate reduced from 12 or 18% to 5%. And when GST rate reduce on tractor, fertilizer, biopesticide, etc., cost of cultivation decreases, with saving on farmer increases. This also lead to adopt more and more method of farm mechanization so that productivity will also increase. Further, increase of income of farmer will motivate him to spend money on providing good storage facility, transportation, technical training, skill development, etc. Or agricultural reduction in taxes on agricultural machinery also motivate farmer to adopt farm mechanization and more machinery. And now GST has very important affected GST affect very importantly urban livelihood also. Urban area in East Singhbhum, mostly we understand Jamshedpur, and the urban area also include district block headquarters such as Ghatsila, Musabani, Chakulia, Behragora. These are block headquarters, and there are many industries, both small scale and large scale
Rano,
industries.
please, in
In
brief,
okay,
please come in fine
in
words.
Jamshedpur and in surrounding areas. And we also know that very close relation between taxation and industrial development also. And in GST reform, tax reduce on coal, cement, iron. This will necessarily benefit industrialization in Jamshedpur and many more major industries such as Tata Steel, Tata Motors, etc. And one of the main thing in East Singhu are forest area. Major out of 3.5 lakh hectare, लगभग 33% is forest area in East Singhbhum. And GST rate on tendu leaf has been reduced from 18% to 5%, and on bamboo 12% to 5%. This rate of reduction will necessarily enhance income security for forest dependent communities in East Singhbhum. And there are also other areas as food sector, item for daily use and hotel room. We know that GST rate decrease, so it will also affect livelihood in both urban area and rural area. Thus, in short, we say that GST reform has very significant and wide impact on rural and urban livelihood. The main focus of this reform, as we know, are simplification, reduction in tax rate, increasing transparency, digitalization, establishment of appellate tribunal, etc. And there is very close connection between tax rate and economic behavior of both consumer and producer. So GST reform will certainly reduce burden of tax on consumer and producer, and this will reduce cost of production, increase consumption, saving, investment, and with these changes, quality of life will improve as people invest more money on food, education, health, skill development, etc. than before. And producer will get more skilled, efficient, talented workforce. Further, labor will move from informal sector to formal sector, and with all the changes, it will lead to growth, employment generation, and rise in production, and further increase in income. And with increased income, tax base will also increase, which increase revenue for government and increased money and increase the spending on infrastructure, safety, education, health, medical facilities, etc. In fact, it is vicious circle. East Singhbhum district is industrial hub, huge mineral deposit, vast potential for agricultural development. Will certainly got benefited from this reform in GST. And with the passage of time, rural and urban livelihood will certainly improve, and entire society will move upward in money, facility, peace, and happiness. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ranu Verma. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now I call Dr. Deepa Sharan, who is professor in Jamshedpur Women University in Commerce Department, Commerce and Management Department.
I would like to take a few minutes to felicitate Dr. Ranu Verma, Section Officer CSIR NML Jamshedpur. For this, I request Professor Dr. Shukla Mahanti ma'am and Dr. Ranu Verma to be there on stage. Next, I would like to request Dr. Deepa Sharan, Associate Professor, Jamshedpur Women's University, Jamshedpur, to be there on stage. Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. आवाज ठीक है? Good evening, ma'am. हाँ? अच्छा ठीक है. अच्छा, good evening, convener of the conference, Dr. Shukla Mahanti Madam, and former Vice Chancellor of Kolhan University, Dr. Goparaya Sir, Devashish Sir, although he is not here, Ranu Verma, Dr. Kumkum Sinha, and all the participants and faculties. So, I am going to present today the Navigating GST Reforms in the Digital Era, a narrative review of implications of MSME in India. So this is the introduction about GST reforms. GST actually GST implemented in India on 1st July 2017. Oh, okay. Okay, so I will start showing the. Huh. This is GST reform. GST reform. This was reform. The one we have already heard all this from keynote speaker and all, but still I am showing this because I have made some graphical presentation based on this. So GST reform. This was done on September 25. This is to simplify compliance procedure and revise the GST rate. So 7.9 crore registered MSMEs are there in India, which employs 35 crore people. MSMEs contributed nearly 29% GDP in financial year 23-24. MSME sector export constituted 45.73% of India's export value, highlighting their role in positioning India as a global manufacturing and export hub. This is GST revenue growth. So revenue growth, we can see that this has been enhanced from 2018 to 2025. 11.77 crore was in 2018, and 2025 it became 23 crore. This is GST revenue trend. So we can see that revenue trend has been upward, is going upward. I am not reading the session. This graph also shows that from 18 to 26, revenue growth has been extended. This is MSME investment and turnover limit. So this is new MSME turnover and I mean investment and turnover limit that has been now become 2.5 crore investment limit, and turnover limit has become 10 crore for micro enterprises. For small enterprise, it is investment limit is 25 and that is 71, and GDP has become 30%. So GDP has not increased that much from 2017 to 2025. But MSMEs has been it has increased. अरे क्या हो गया? हाँ. So this is MSME contribution. So that small part, only this much contribution is 30% from 2018 to 2025. There is only 1% increase in MSMEs. Sorry, 1% increase in GDP. This is MSME's growth trends. So MSMEs, as I have already shown, from 2017 to 2025, MSMEs have been grown extensively. This is architecture, GST architecture and compliance challenges for MSMEs. GST rates in 2017 it were 0%, 5%, 12%, 18%, and 28%. This is already discussed about everybody, so I am skipping this slide. This is compliance barrier. So there are so many compliance barriers. I am concluding this that the most important compliance barrier is digital infrastructure. So all small units, all MSMEs, those MSMEs which are not having proper digital infrastructure and proper trained manpower, digital manpower, so they are facing compliance problems. Input tax credit mechanism, this has already been cascading tax, this is already done. Digital access and GST compliance. So for GST compliance, GSTN, that is Goods Service Tax Network, is a fully digital platform, and that platform includes everything: registration, return, ITC, refund, e-way bills. Everything is done through the GST network. Digital adoption. Digital adoption has also been increased from 2017 to 2025 because this is mandatory. Everybody who is doing business, they have to pay GST. And for paying GST, they have to follow digital platform. So for following digital platform, digital adoption has been increased, and internet subscribers are also increased. So this is digital adoption among MSMEs. In 2017 it was 32%, and in 2025 it is 76% now. Digital literacy and tax knowledge. So digital literacy, this is the main compliance barrier of GST adoption, because GST are lack of ineffective adoption of GST, are lack of skilled manpower and poor IT infrastructure. Everybody is not having proper IT infrastructure. There is need of investment in human capital to address the compliance challenges faced by MSMEs. There is need for users to learn and educate themselves to effectively use e-governance system. Lack of qualified manpower result in inadequate IT system readiness. This is my conclusion. Because of time constraint, I am skipping the slides. So GST 2.0 has reduced compliance burden by lowering input cost, easier compliance rate cuts on essential goods and services will make Indian products globally competitive and also increase domestic demand. GST 2.0 supported by, oh my God, supported by AI driven fraud detection, है ना, वो जो portal है, that is AI driven fraud detection. So instant approval invoicing ensures transparency and minimizes tax evasion. Thank you. Thank you. And I wish, I am thankful to Shuklamanti madam for giving me this opportunity, and I wish this 2-day seminar will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepa. Really, your statistical presentation is very impressive, and your graph and your figures are very impressive, and definitely I will send it to the ICSSR for their publication and all. Thank you very much. Next, that is a PowerPoint presentation. और है PowerPoint? तो है और नहीं है?
I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Professor Dr. Shukla Mahanti ma'am for chairing this session successfully. I would like to say thanks to all the chairpersons as well as all the resource persons and people presenters for presenting the people. Tomorrow we will meet again the same place for the second day of national conference. Till then, thank you.